Hello Foundation fans, fellow Mudbeards, and anyone who's super happy we finally got an answer to the question raised in episode 1 of the series, that being, who destroyed the Starbridge? Well, I guess we know who exactly destroyed it, but now we know why. It's revealed to us very casually and in the very opening minutes of this episode that Demrazel herself was responsible for the Starbridge attack. Essentially, she had gotten in contact with an Anacreon and Thespin who were willing to sacrifice themselves and enact the violence that killed hundreds of millions of people. She claimed that she did this for Foundation. It actually makes sense that she did this for Foundation, as at the time, Harry Seldon was likely to be executed by Empire. Essentially, Empire already had him on trial because his predictions had made their way around Trantor and pretty much lead them to believe that Harry's only goal was to sow doubt in the common folk. Had there not been an active example of the danger Trantor was in, one that would be foolish for Harry himself to enact considering he's still right there under the Empire's grasp, this essentially was the only reason Harry was able to get exiled to Terminus like he originally intended. Honestly, other than Demrazel, Harry was the only other person I truly thought could have been behind the Starbridge attack, had it not just been something that was predicted in general. This raises a lot of questions about her programming and what exactly her goal is in the long run, as she is in support of Empire and the longevity of Empire, but very early on she did figure out that Empire was for sure going to fall at some point. The Zephyr that she's opening up to immediately points out some of the contradictions in Demrazel's programming, and how she kind of painted herself an escape even if she didn't intend to, her urging Demrazel to embrace her new life she would get once the Empire's actually gone. We then go back to Second Foundation, where Han Pritchard returns to Gale Dornick. We get some amazing Preem Power scenes, and I gotta say, he's continuing to be one of my favorite characters. Either way, he's able to connect minds visually and allow Gale to see what Han Pritchard saw when he encountered the mule. If this seems like a crazy new ability, well, it's really not. A lot of the most powerful Mentalics have something very unique to them only. Tellum could send people within their memory so they could visually feel and see everything they used to see before. Gale can see the future and feel the presence of everything she would eventually feel. And Salvor had extreme intuition, her gut normally pointing her in the right direction. Like how she pointed out how Harry, being given a body, was likely so that he would have skin in the game, because otherwise he likely would have reduced everyone down to numbers. And any other entities or robots couldn't have any skin in the game. Essentially, it's through this interaction that they learn a little bit more about the mule, and how instrumental the music is in the mule's powers. It was kind of revealed in the first episode, but it's solidified in this episode when Gale and Han Pritchard are catching up that the Second Foundation is a big reason why the Galactic Council is in as much power as they're in now, as we've seen them grow in power with each season. It seems this newfound agency was also attributed to by the Second Foundation, likely in the shadows. And for anyone wondering, they do clarify what the actual third crisis is, which isn't the mule. It was predicted to be a civil war amongst a growing dissension within the Foundation. Obviously the mule kind of threw a wrench into that prediction, but I do actually like the way they portrayed Han and Gale's relationship here. They didn't spend a lot of time with flashbacks or showing their first meeting, as they just kind of trust their audience to piece together that Han grew up as a Mentalic with the Second Foundation. Which you gotta kind of feel bad for him. He grew up seeing Gale very rarely, and getting very close with Seldon. But who knows how his life was while he was a Mentalic before he was picked up by the Second Foundation. And once he was a part of the Second Foundation, his whole life was pretty much geared towards one specific goal. This kind of emphasizes how Gale's story arc has come full circle within the narrative. See, Han is pushing Gale to maybe start a family and have a life, calm down and not maybe focus on all the crazy things happening. But Gale is very mission focused, not wanting to lose track on the long-term goals of humanity. This is very akin to the dynamic Gale and Harry possessed in previous seasons, with Harry being very mission focused and losing some of that empathy or sympathy he would have for humans and what they would actually want, as opposed to being part of this grand plan. And Gale originally just wanting to be seen and escape a dying world, and then eventually wanting to settle down with Raish, and pretty much forced to be this unsung hero that takes care of and maybe saves humanity. And while obviously the biggest priority should be how to stop the mule and some of the biggest problems the galaxy will face, it's also still very important to be human and embrace things that life has to offer. Harry's reluctance to include people on his plan, or truly pay attention to what their needs and wants actually were, resulted in his plan continuing to take place, but a lot of rough patches happening in between. One not so small one being isolated for 150 something years, and almost losing his mind completely. So let's hope Gale figures out this lesson a little bit earlier and the mule doesn't take up her entire lifespan. But you kind of have to see where she's coming from, considering all she ever sees most times she closes her eyes is potentially her final battle, as her foresight doesn't actually go beyond that point. Either way, I think this could be dark foreshadowing for Han Pritchard and Gale's relationship in the future, but I'll touch more on that in my spoiler section. We then catch up with Ebling Miz, who's meeting with Mayor Ember. This scene was very interesting, but I do want to touch on it a little bit later in the video. Either way, this scene does transition us to Ambassador Quint receiving the news that Selden gave the Prime Radiant to Empire back in Season 2. Quint finally putting together some of Dusk's past actions. She does confront Dusk about this, and mainly confronts Dusk about this, obviously not aware that Demerzel is really the one she should be talking to. And to keep up the facade, Dusk does make Demerzel give back the Prime Radiant to Quint. This makes Demerzel upset,
as that's her favorite toy, and Harry Selden gave it to her, not Ambassador Quint. And if she wanted one so bad, she should go get her own.
Anyways, there's a lot of cute scenes in their interactions with Dusk and Quint that allude to their past relationship they probably had. Which is interesting if you think about it. There's just a lot of story there to work with. We get another awesome shot of Day walking around the palace with his ferret, and I gotta say, with that ferret having free reign to walk around, it has to come into play at some point within the story. Anyways, Brother Dude does the same thing we see in Season 2 of Foundation, which is call upon a digital copy of Cleon I's memory. He approaches this interaction respectfully, but I really appreciate how he ended up going about this entire ordeal. Primarily trying to figure out more about the Mycogen sector, Cleon I reveals that when Abuneris had officially won the robot wars and ordered all robots killed, some robots had slipped through the cracks and became fugitives on Trantor. Potentially some even made it off-world. And while Empire did their best to root them out, they eventually re-indoctrinated into society and gained a following, creating the inheritance, the belief that a robot will come back and guide humanity in the right direction. And it turns out, long ago, Cleon I had gone down there to find the tools Demerzel uses to repair herself, the people of the inheritance seeing it as something to cherish. But this does lead to Brother Dude putting Cleon I in his place, which is just another solid reason why Brother Dude is honestly my favorite Emperor we've seen so far in the series. He then goes to visit Demerzel to see if he can maybe sneak one of her tools or devices away, hoping to use it as a bartering system for the inheritance. It's during her conversation with him that she reveals something interesting about robots, that at some point they could share each other's minds, and or think as one. I believe she referred to this as a process known as the clasp, which leaves you to think how similar that is to something else we got in this very episode, which is Prime Palvor clasping both Gale and Han's heads so they could share memories and thoughts. I don't know, there's just some interesting similarities there, but I'm going to touch more into that in the spoiler section. Either way, we continue on, and it turns out I totally misread the Brother Dude scene when he was gambling with the Imperial Guard. I originally thought this was just his way of making sure they were financially stable, but it turns out this wasn't the case, and Brother Dude was just letting himself get screwed over out of money, or palace heirlooms, while keeping an analytical eye on all the bluffs and actions of some of the Imperial Guard there. But yeah, considering how nice that dude's home was, I don't think Brother Dude was necessarily trying to help him out that much. I think he was just enjoying his time with the people of Trantor. And unfortunately, all that time spent together didn't amount to enough to not betray each other in the end. As it seems, both Brother Dude and his Imperial Guard friend were at some point going to try to screw each other over either way, with the Imperial Guard never really being on Brother Dude's side, and Brother Dude having his plan of betrayal from the very beginning. This also segues us to another unexpected meeting with Brother Dawn and Gale. This time, Gale showing up in person. Once she does, the Imperial Guard come in and chase them out, her escaping back onto the beggar with Dawn. And it seems they head off so they can go back to the Second Foundation, her revealing their name altogether. But something very interesting to notice here. Notice Brother Dude, when he was going to escape, he specifically needed to get rid of his Imperial nanites. But Brother Dawn, as far as we've known, has not done that so far, let alone even mention them in the first place. No, I'm still under the impression that you cannot trust Brother Dawn. I think he's playing this little act with Gale because he plans on screwing them over. And at the very least, if he's not planning anything, there's a lot of risk factor in him figuring out how much Gale has been screwing over the Empire since he was a kid, and since before he was a kid. He might have something to say about realizing he would never get to rule a proper empire because of Gale's actions, and the Second Foundation. Either way, we're gonna go ahead and cut to the book spoiler section of the video, so if you don't want any potential spoilers, hop on out of here. We got a very interesting scene with Ebbling Miz. Ebbling, upon approaching Mayor Ember, seems a little off, confirming that he just went to visit Harry and was gonna update him on the Prime Radiant situation. But notice Mayor Ember had said specifically he hadn't seen Ebbling Miz for days. I believe there are potentially two different points in time that the mule has already made contact with Ebbling Miz. See, in the books, the mule uses his emotional manipulation power to force Ebbling Miz to make finding the Second Foundation his #1 priority. And nobody knew it at the time, but the dude was basically working himself to death and nobody could figure out why. His body and composition was just very much declining. Yet in certain moments he would be filled with energy again and very focused. This was due to the mule's tampering of his mind. And I'm wondering if potentially right before he goes to meet with Mayor Ember, or maybe even before he meets Vault Harry altogether, he and the mule have already interacted, and the mule has already seeped into his mind in a way. But let's go back to the Empire. I'm really enjoying Brother Dude's hatred of Demerzel being a robot this season. And while I personally do believe she's being genuine with a lot of her emotions and words that she's saying, as proven by her conversations with Zephyr Halima back in Season 1, when there was no reason to put on an emotional display whatsoever, there's solid evidence to the fact that she is actually caring for the Cleons. But I do understand where Brother Dude's perspective is coming from here, and I enjoy just how much spite he throws her way. And I would really enjoy the ultimate irony if he finally reconnected with Song, only to figure out that Song herself was one of these escaped robot fugitives, revealing that Brother Dude has been in love with a robot the entire time. But let's cut back to Demerzel for a second. If you were able to get past the horrible audio in one of my previous Demerzel character videos, then you would have heard my theory about Demerzel and the quick trailer shot we see of her putting her hands on Gale's head, and these weird glowing lights we see going down Gale's face. Maybe there could actually be a connection between robots being able to do somewhat similar abilities themselves. Maybe not to a certain extent, but with this whole idea of the clasp and sharing memories, I have to think this sequence is slightly related to that, which means maybe there's some way robots and Mentalics can actually work together, or maybe even Mentalics are slightly human, slightly robot. Either way, I wonder if them sharing memories in this moment is what leads to another trailer shot we see of them fighting. Potentially Demerzel realizing Gale's been actively working towards the decline of the Empire, or even reaching conflict on what to do with Gale. And the reason her programming would reach conflict is because Gale is a part of the Second Foundation, and there seems to be some sort of side ambition or programming she has to make sure the Foundation is successful in what they're doing. According to the books, maybe even she's trying to get the Second Foundation built to be a second empire. That, or we have the final confirmation that Demerzel really is daneel, and all of the actions she's taking are necessary ones to hopefully guide humanity in the long run. And there is also a chance that with this idea of fugitives and Demerzel's place in the story, that there is no Giskard. Some of my comments thankfully pointed out that there was a licensing issue with some of the iRobot novels and the Foundation novels, so supposedly they may not have access to the character of Giskard altogether. But if you want to hear more about Kalle and some of my theories about her, check out my Kalle video. Either way, if there is no Giskard and Demerzel does happen to be daneel, then where would that leave Kalle exactly? Well, I personally believe that she could have potentially been one of these fugitives who escaped, and has been working in the background ever since, trying to get a plan going to either save humanity or take her revenge against humanity. But if anyone's gonna take their revenge for all the robots killed, it's likely to be Demerzel, not Kalle, as she seems to have a vested interest in humanity's destiny. Some of my commenters also mentioned that Kalle could be Gaian, and while I do think this is very possible, I personally believe that she's still actually a robot. Either way, it seems likely, or at least I really hope, the story builds to a point where we get sort of a clash between Demerzel and Kalle, and these different ideals and beliefs between robots who they serve, their place amongst humans, and the laws they should follow, whether it be the 3 laws of robotics
or the Xeroth Law.
as everyone told me that's how it's pronounced. Either way, I don't think we should trust Don, and I don't want anyone to forget that. You can drag me away screaming, even if the season ends with his character dying a hero, I don't trust him. Nobody should trust him. You cannot trust him. Either way, thank you all for watching, appreciate the feedback, and remember, it's all part of Don's plan.